Hello and welcome to the CNBC-TV18 exclusive interview. I'm Shireen Bhan. We join you from the capital to talk about a sector that is no stranger to turbulence. But in the eye of a storm currently is Vistara, the airline that has seen a fair degree of disruption. Over 100 flights being cancelled over the last few days on account of issues with pilots. Pilots are concerned about compensation as the merger process with Air India, the other Tata aviation company, is underway. There are also concerns on rostering and scheduling. Letters have been written to Tata Group Chairman N. Chandrasekaran by pilots associations getting the Tata Group to address some of these concerns. There was a town hall just 24 hours ago where the Vistara CEO did try to take on board concerns that pilots had raised. To understand what the flight path looks like going forward, joining me now on the CNBC-TV18 exclusive interview is the CEO of Vistara, Vinod Kannan. Mr. Kannan, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. To start with, what is the current level in terms of disruption? How much have you had to rationalize operations? You do about 300 to 350 flights every day. What is the current quantum that you're flying?
Thank you, Shireen, firstly, for having me. And before I start off, I want to apologize to all our customers who were affected quite badly over the weekend. It's definitely not Vistara is known for, and we hope that we will bounce back, and we are bouncing back. So to give you an idea, yes, we used to operate about 350 flights a day. We are shy of that by about 5%. So we are short by about 20 flights or so every day. But these flights have been cancelled mainly to provide a little bit more buffer. And it's not for any other reasons other than that.
So, Vinod, let's understand what has led to this crisis at Vistara. Why have pilots chosen to go on sick leave en masse? How many pilots have actually come to the management raising concerns over compensation? Let's break this down. How much of this is compensation related? How much of it is related to scheduling and rostering issues? What is at the heart of this current crisis?
So, Shireen, I just have to, again, state this unequivocally. The reason why we had this whole situation over the weekend, let me break it down for you. We've been growing pretty rapidly. Over the last month, we've taken delivery of 3 or so additional aircraft. And what happens is every month we come up with rosters to crew these flights for pilots and cabin crew. We did have a roster for the month of March as well, but unfortunately it was quite stretched, which basically meant that we did not have enough buffer or enough resilience in the network. And what also happened was through the month of March, we had a few operational disruptions. For example, we had bird strikes, we had some aircraft down for maintenance, and we also had some ATC delays. Now, when such things happen, it affects the rosters of the pilots, and the rosters get broken up. And since we did not have enough buffer or standby, we were not able to crew the flights fast enough. And then it started snowballing because we had to wait for the next set of crew to come in and so on and so forth. So the point that you made about sick leave and pilots calling in sick, I have to say that actually towards the end of the financial year in March, sick leave for us usually goes up because that's the end of the year. That is a normal trend. We had planned for that. Maybe it was slightly higher than that, but that was not the main reason why this happened. I think on a planning level, we should have done better. We were a lot more aggressive, perhaps, than we should have been. And I also want to state that actually, when we were going through this crisis over the last weekend, we had to reach out to some of our pilots.
I'm interrupting you just to get clarity on what you've said, Vinod. You're essentially saying that the pilots going on leave is part of what happens at the year end. This was not a sign of protest. Some degree may have been, but pilots going on sick leave was something that the management had already factored in, but clearly not planned as effectively as it ought to have. So this was not a mark of protest. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, what I'm saying is that there is, we are aware that there's certain, feedback and certain concerns, whether it's with rostering or whether it's with contracts, and I'll come to that later. But I think fundamentally for us, we should have planned better, and my team takes responsibility for this. It's a situation that should and could have been avoided. And as I said, there are pilots who stepped in fact, who canceled their leave and came in to operate some of these flights, and I'm grateful for that. But at the end of the day, I think this was something that should have been managed better. The amount of sick leave that is being mentioned in various media reports, I again have to clarify that it's nowhere significantly higher than what usually happens during this part of the year.
Okay, so, let's address the compensation issue now. And I want to understand, you have, what, about 900 pilots on board at this point in time? And correct me if that number is different. What is the percentage of pilots who are unhappy with the change in compensation on account of the merger process with Air India? What is the size of the problem that we're talking about?
So we have about 1,000 pilots. It's just slightly higher than what you said. From what we see and what we've kind of looked at, we believe that majority of the pilots, as long as they fly the same number of hours as they're flying now, will be better off in the new contract. Having said that, I know that it's not about averages. It's not about medians. We have to talk about each and every pilot, and each and every staff matters. And therefore, we know that there are certain sets of pilots who perhaps have some apprehension and some concerns, and we are aware of this. We've actually reached out to these pilots. In fact, as you said, I had a town hall with them as well. It's not the first time we're doing this. We've done it before, even during the transition to the new contract. We continue to do this. We will hear out, and we have been hearing out their concerns, and we are working to see what we can do to, make this better. So it's an ongoing process. There are certain sections of pilots who have raised concerns. I also have to say that there are different levels of pilots, from senior commanders to first officers and junior first officers. So across various areas, depending on how much each pilot flies, there's different kind of impact, which is what we are working out now. And we'll be in touch with the pilots to get back to them and answer their questions.
So, when you talk about the fact that there is an acknowledgement of the issue, and you're trying to address the problem, so what are the options that you're considering? Because the challenge is that you're moving now from 70 hours of guaranteed pay down to 40 hours, which is what has caused some consternation with certain sections of the pilot community at Vistara. So how do you address that? What are you likely to change, if anything at all? Because there have been, letters by the HR department at Vistara that have gone public, where essentially you're telling pilots that, look, either you accept these contracts or there's no recourse for you. Is that the way forward?
So just to clarify again, the questions or the communication that you're talking about was essentially to clarify that if pilots do not sign up to the new contract, they will not be transitioned into it, and therefore into the merged entity. But let's go back to the question that you're asking. There are few sets of concerns, or I would say two broad sets of concerns that pilots have had. One is around rostering, around scheduling, and about how they operate their flights. And on this aspect, rostering is something that is always quite contentious. There are various sections of pilots with various lifestyles. There are some who have families who prefer to stay at their home base. There are others who are younger who prefer to travel out and be outside for much longer periods of time. And of course, we can't have different systems for each set of pilot. So in fact, we were one of the first airlines in the country to introduce an automated system where pilots could bid for what kind of lifestyles they want. If someone wants to go on a flight, say from Delhi to Bombay and then come back, they could assign this, and they could indicate this as their lifestyle, which is preferred. So having done all this, we know that there is still room for improvement, and we are in discussion and constant dialogue with our pilots. In fact, we're going to have another town hall where we're going to ask them what they would like to see with the rostering system and how we can improve this. And therefore, based on that, we will take a cue, and that's why the rosters for May, we hopefully will incorporate some of this feedback that the pilots will have. So that's the first aspect in terms of scheduling and rostering. Around the second aspect, which is around the contract, the new contract, based on the average amount of hours that we fly today, which is around the numbers that we're talking about, which is 70 to 75 hours, we believe that the majority of the pilots should be better off. But yes, there would be circumstances or situations where perhaps certain groups of pilots may have some apprehensions around this. And for these pilots, we'll have to see what we can do in order to make this transition slightly easier for them. So that's something we're open to, and that's something that we're discussing with the pilots as well.
Vinod, I want to raise the issue of the two pilots association, the Air India Indian Commercial Pilots Association and the Indian Pilots Guild, writing to Tata Group Chairman N. Chandrasekaran. Now, a whole host of issues, including what we just spoke of, being raised in that letter to the Tata Sons chairman, but also saying things like, the culture amounts to pilots being treated as bonded labor, that this is not an isolated incident, that there is a systemic problem at place. Now, you're almost a decade, of Vistara's existence flying here in India. What do you believe has led to things getting to this pass where you actually have two associations writing, talking about systemic issues and talking about pilots being treated as bonded labor in their words?
At least as far as Vistara is concerned, the rostering system and the rostering practices that we've had haven't changed much over at least the last 5 to 6 years. Yes, we've been flying more, we've been flying our pilots more, and the utilization is higher, which also means that the pilots are to some extent stretched a little bit more. But broadly and fundamentally, it's kind of a similar rostering practices of systems. Having said this, I think there is definitely scope for us to hear more from the pilots. There's scope for us to adjust this based on the feedback that we get from pilots, and that's exactly what we're going to do. And having looked at the various options that we have, definitely we believe that the rostering system and the rostering practices or the rostering mechanism that we have is something that is quite fair. But obviously, we'll need to take into account feedback from our pilots to see how we can improve that further.
Vinod, I want to understand from you, you have 1,000 pilots at this point in time. You've got about 70 aircraft in your fleet. Is there a need to look at bringing more pilots on board? Is that an option that you're considering? I mean, you have got some relief from the government with the DGCA deferring the fatigue norms, and that has been deferred for now, which is something that all airlines were seeking from the government, that relaxation. But given where you find your situation at this point in time, do you believe that you will need to hire more? And will you?
We do, we need to, and we will. So it's an ongoing process. We are looking to hire more pilots. We are also looking to train more pilots who are there in the system. And at the same time, while this might take a little bit of time, that's precisely the reason why we've had to have this situation of scaling back just a little bit, like I spoke at the head of the show, by 5 to 7%, so that we can create that buffer, not just for operational resilience, but also to perhaps provide a slightly better kind of roster for the existing pilots.
Again, I just want to understand this curtailing of operations that you just explained to us you've had to do to try and provide some buffer within the system at this point. How long is this likely to continue? When do you believe you'll be able to go back to full capacity and normal operations? How long do you expect the disruptions to last?
So a couple of points on this. Most of the disruptions that affected our passengers very, very badly over the last weekend were because the cancellations were made either on the same day or for the next day, which is never good because a person turns up at the airport and then is told that the flight is cancelled. So apart from that, from the 3rd of April onwards, most of the cancellations have been made at least 2 to 3 days in advance. That process continues. In fact, for now, we've made these cancellations up to the 10th of April. Over this weekend, we hope to close the entire operations for the month of April. So yes, there might be a curtailment in operations, but it's something that is planned. We re-accommodate these passengers on other flights, either on us or on other airlines. And it's not going to be a situation where passengers get a route shock when they come to the airport. So that's as far as this month is concerned. Now, we are now sitting down to look at what are the rostering norms or the rostering mechanisms or the rostering parameters which should be in place for May and beyond. And therefore, once we have clarity on that, sometime towards the middle of next week, we will then publish the rosters for the month of May. That might again see a curtailment because it depends on what kind of preference the pilots have and what kind of buffers we want to take. But at the end of the day, it will not be unplanned and last-minute disruption, which is the worst kind to have.
So the planned curtailment, you believe that that is going to continue for a bit longer. What has been the quantum of flights that you've had to cancel altogether since the start of this crisis? And more importantly, in terms of refunds and also in terms of cancellations, passengers obviously have been reading about traumatic experiences of other passengers having spent 12 hours at the airports and so on and so forth. Have you seen an impact of people cancelling on flights?
So two parts to the question. And firstly, what are we doing about this? It's not just about the, talking to customers and apologizing to them. As of today, we are sending out individual emails to each of the customers affected. It's not just about refunds. That's something that we will, of course, do. We are also going to provide them with compensation for passengers who were delayed for long times. We are also going to provide them with additional vouchers, so that which is again a token apology from us. So all that is happening as we speak to the customers. And on your second point, which is what is the message and what are we seeing in terms of bookings and cancellations? Thankfully for us, I don't think we've seen a huge drop off. It's probably all the goodwill that we've earned over the last 9 years. And we really want to thank our customers and hope they give us the patience for us to bounce back over the weekend.
Vinod, as you pointed out, you are reaching out to customers and trying to woo them back, and trust is a hard currency to trade in, and you've tried to do that with your customers and build that trust and build reputation and customer satisfaction and customer experience over this decade that you've been operating in India. How much has this damaged reputation? What has this done in terms of reputational loss, in terms of a lack of trust with your customers, and how do you build that back?
It is something that we are thinking very, very closely about. I think there's two elements to this. One, of course, is the external element, which is to all our customers. And the only way, I suppose, that we can earn back this trust is to ensure that we get back to form quite quickly. And on that front, we are quite, it's quite heartening that over the last 2 days, our on-time performance has been in excess of 80 to 85%. So we are back on track, at least for the flights that we are operating. And what you see is what you get in the system. And the second part of this is internal, because to my 6,500 staff, we've always had the pleasure of having an extremely good experience and providing great service to our customers. And we hope that, and we know that this blip or this disruption has kind of dented that. So I've had discussions and town halls with each group of staff, not just pilots, with various verticals. And I think the message is very consistent and clear that this was something that should not have happened. It's unfortunate, but we are going to bounce back from this. And our staff can once again, hold their heads high and service our customers when they come to the airport.
Vinod, you said that there is an acknowledgement that that the rostering system should have planned for the sick leaves that were anticipated for the month of March. You acknowledge the fact that it didn't work as per plan and should have been dealt with better. In terms of course correction from here on, outside of the rostering issues, outside of training and perhaps hiring more, and of course dealing with the compensation issues, on the back end, Vinod, what are the other changes that you believe you need to fix? What are the other changes that you need to make? And how complex are those going to be, given the fact that you're now on the back end also going to see a significant transition as this merger process takes shape?
So, of course, the changes which will have to be made are mostly through, as you said, the rostering system, the practices in terms of what curtailment that we need to do in the network, as well as, I think, the approach that we've had, which has been consultative, but perhaps we need to be a little bit more open and have more dialogues and hear a little bit more from the pilots as well. And that's something which I think we will continue to do. As far as the merger and the integration is concerned, I think the main point is that the merger that we are looking at, or the integration, is one for scale, one for growth. And there is definitely excitement and opportunities, at the end of it. So that is something that we will be working towards. We are in the middle of this. We are also working out various aspects of how to transition into one integrated unit. And that also comes with its own complexities that we're trying to navigate.
I just want to pursue that the plan as far as the merger is concerned, and Air India has said that they're now entering the climb phase. They were so far in the takeoff phase as part of the Vihan plan that had been laid out for turning the airline around. They're now in the climb phase. But what does it mean for Vistara as you move forward into this integration, and how complex is it going to really be on the back end? Is that adding to the current set of challenges that you're facing? And of course, the pilots issue is directly linked to the merger because you're changing comp to match what Air India pilots are getting.
So from a back-end perspective, or from a systems perspective, or from a mechanism perspective, yes, we are trying to see how we can align various things and how we can make the transition and integrate with Air India, of course. People situation, like you said, not just pilots, but with other verticals as well, with other staff. We are very clear and we are very sure that we want to make sure that the transition is smooth for them. And that's the process that we would like to adopt. And that's the process that we need to adopt. When it comes to handling the integration on top of the current challenges, I'm quite confident that we are more or less at the end of this disruption that we've had. We will be able to come out of this quite soon, as I said, by this weekend, and then by the next week or so. And then our focus again will be to go back to the world-class operations that we provide and that we give, and then focus a lot more on integration as we get the various approvals in the coming weeks and months.
The DGCA and the Civil Aviation Ministry had also asked Vistara for an explanation as to what transpired over the weekend leading to the kind of disruption that we saw. Have you responded to the ministry? Have you responded to the regulator? What's been the conversation and the dialogue?
So we have, and we've also been asked to provide details on cancellations on a daily basis, which we are doing. We've also assured the ministry and the DGCA that we are taking care of the passengers. We are following the norms of what is required in terms of cancellation compensations and penalties and so on, including for delays when you have to provide food and beverage wherever it's possible. So all those are being followed, and I think it's important for us to reassure the ministry and the DGCA that we are following this, which is what we're doing. But at the end of the day, it's not a pleasant situation to be in. We want to come out of it as soon as we can, which is what we're working towards.
Vinod, we're at the start of a new financial year, and given where you find yourself today with this current crisis that you're dealing with, lay out for me the flight path for 2024, both in terms of fleet addition as well as the need to bring more pilots on board to be able to deal with the kind of capacity that you currently have, as well as the capacity that you're planning to add.
So at this point in time, we have 70 aircraft in our fleet. That's a mix of 63 narrow bodies and 7 wide bodies. That concludes actually the order book that we have. So through this year, we are not taking in any additional aircraft as Vistara. So that gives us some reprieve because it's a matter of optimizing what we have. And that's the reason why we are still continuing to recruit to fill up this buffer or the gap, which we were talking about. So there's no additional aircraft or fleet growth that's coming in. But whatever we have now, we will be utilizing it to the extent possible by ramping up on pilots, ramping up on cabin crew as is needed.
Okay, so no additional aircraft being added to the fleet this year. You said you're hopeful that by the end of the week or by next week, the current phase of disruptions will be a thing of the past. Do you feel confident of being able to do that? Or do you believe that you may have to continue with rationalized operations through the month of April and perhaps through May?
We might have to rationalize our operations and scale it back by a little bit. I think that's definitely possible. But what I'm trying to highlight is that it's something that will be planned. We will take care of passengers who are affected perhaps on these flights. And hopefully by the month of May, we will be able to go back to normal operations and schedule.
Okay, so the rationalization exercise to continue at least up until May. Vinod, many thanks for joining us, for clearing the air on a whole host of issues, as well as giving us an idea of what Vistara is doing to address the current concerns that pilots have raised, as well as address the concerns that customers have, because at the end of the day, it is the customer that bears the brunt of the disruptions that we have seen. Thank you for joining us and acknowledging where the problems are, but more importantly, what the course correction looks like on the road ahead. Appreciate your time. We will take a break here on the CNBC TV18 Newsmaker and come back with plenty more. Stay tuned. Welcome to this special show. I'm Ritu Singh. The Reserve Bank of India has held key policy rates for the 7th time in a row as expected. The MPC, in a 5-1 majority, decided to keep the repo rate unchanged at 6.5% and the stance unchanged as well. The central bank stuck to its earlier GDP growth projection of 7% for FY25, contrary to market expectations of a potential upgrade to the forecast. Governor Shaktikanta Das said that inflation, which he called the elephant in the room, was seen to be headed towards the woods, and he hoped that the elephant stayed in the woods for the time being. Listen in to what the governor said.
Now, 2 years ago, around this time, when CPI inflation had peaked at 7.8% in April 2022, the elephant in the room was inflation. The elephant has now gone out for a walk and appears to be returning to the forest. We would like the elephant to return to the forest and remain there on a durable basis. In other words, it is essential in the best interest of the economy that CPI inflation continues to moderate and aligns to the target on a durable basis. Till this is achieved, our task remains unfinished.
Okay, Lata Venkatesh is also with us with her editor's take on the Reserve Bank of India policy. Lata, over to you.
Well, I think you summed it up very well. There is absolutely no change. I can't see a better example of the word status quoist. And as you pointed out, even the growth expectations or the growth forecasts have not been revised higher, although they were revised higher in the bulletin, which just came out, the March bulletin. So that's a bit of a surprise. Otherwise, it's totally unexpected lines. So let's look at how things will pan out and parse the details of the press conference. We have our guest with us, Samiran Chakrabarti, the chief economist at Citi, Mridul Sagar, a former executive director at Reserve Bank of India and former member of the MPC, now professor at IIM Kozhikode. We also have with us B. Prasanna, who of course heads global markets and treasury at ICICI Bank. In a bit, we are going to be joined by the biggest banker, Chairman of State Bank of India, Mr. Dinesh Khara. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for your time. Well, Samiran, let me start with you. What's the key takeaway that you got in terms of this reference to potential growth? The governor says potential growth will be relooked. So if it is revised higher, does the neutral rate also go higher? Is that a hawkish statement?
Thanks, Lata, for having me. And I think this is something which we need to understand a bit more carefully. Maybe as you were referring to the fact that the RBI has kept the FY25 growth numbers unchanged could also be connected to this need to reassess the potential growth number, which they are going to do once the FY24 full year GDP is released end of May. But if you look at it, there are two opposing effects here. So one effect is that if the potential growth number is relatively higher, then one can justify that the real neutral rate could be somewhat higher. And then on the basis of that, the nominal policy rate could also be slightly elevated. But on the other hand, if your potential growth is higher, then for the same level of actual GDP growth, the output gap will be relatively lower. And from that perspective, the need to have a slightly higher nominal rate is not going to be there. So depending upon which one of the two effects are going to dominate, the impact on the nominal policy rate could be different. We all know that in the past, RBI has put the real neutral rate at 80 to 100 basis point around FY22. But historically, this number used to be around 150, 160 basis point. So has things normalized? Are we going back to that 150, 160 neutral rate? But at the same time, is even with this 8% kind of GDP growth, the output gap is not very positive just because potential growth is higher. I think that's the debate that we'll have to settle once this reassessment is done.
Why don't I toss that to the man who has already won